Get ready for quick, easy, and affordable farmhouse DIY inspiration. These DIYs made my list of favorites, and for good reason. They're beautiful, and with most of the items coming from Dollar Tree, you cannot beat the price. And as always, DIY treats. Welcome to my channel, Craft, Eat, Repeat. Hi guys, it's Aneka and welcome to my channel, Craft, Eat, Repeat. So today's video is one that I'm really excited about. It is chock full of DIY farmhouse inspiration for you guys. These are 15 or 16, I haven't decided yet, of my very favorite DIYs of this year. Now, I think we can all agree that this year has been one for the history books. I mean, a lot has gone on this year, but one of the silver linings is that I had so much time to stay home and craft. And for a while there, I had to just craft from my stash. I couldn't run out to the store. And even though at first it was kind of hard for me, it ended up sparking so much imagination and creativity. And I just love some of the DIYs that we did this year. So I really hope you enjoy this video. Now, this is a compilation of some of my favorites from different videos, and I will be sure to link the full video down below so that if you like one, you can go and watch the whole thing and get even more DIY inspiration. If you're new here, welcome. Thank you so much for stopping by. If you like what you see, please hit that subscribe button. Everyone hit that notification bell so you'll be ready when my next video comes out. And when it's over, head down to the comments and let me know which DIY was your favorite. Or as always, you can just say hi, Happy New Year, Happy Holidays. Tell me what you're looking forward to in the new year. I would love to hear it. Also, find me on my social media platforms and show me what you've been crafting and creating. Okay guys, since this is a compilation, I recommend you go grab your cozy blanket, maybe a warm drink, and get ready for some crafting inspiration because it's time to craft. So this is a plastic tray that I found from Walmart. They had pink, blue, a bunch of different colors, all very bright, but I wanted to turn this into more of a farmhouse neutral looking tray. So I got a piece of poster board from Dollar Tree. I traced around the outside of my tray. I cut out my oval, and then I needed to trim it up to fit it inside the tray since it was slightly bigger from tracing the outside. So I went ahead and I trimmed all of this up, and you guys, when you're doing this step, you want to make sure that you trim it so that it fits very close to the edge, but that there is no overlap at all, because once we put our wood on the tray, it's going to be an even tighter fit and we want it to slide in easily. So I trimmed some off, I placed it in, I saw where it was still pressing up against the sides, and I kind of drew a line so I could see exactly where I needed to trim. Now I wanted to do kind of a herringbone pattern with my wood pieces, so I needed to find the exact middle of the tray. There's a little knob there, so I just used my paint pen and colored right on top, placed my poster board on it, pressed down, and when I lifted it up, I had a little mark right at the center of my tray. Next, I looked at my handles and I just kind of eyeballed this. I tried to find the middle and make a dot in the middle, and then I drew a line to connect all three of those dots. Now you can just do your wood pieces straight across and you won't even have to go through this to find the middle of your oval, but I wanted to do that herringbone pattern. I thought it would make it look really high end, so I took the extra time to mark a line all the way down the center of my oval. Next, I wanted to paint my tray, and I like to use this plaster color. You guys, I realized afterwards that I did not need to paint the middle, and paint is hard to find these days, so just paint the sides. I use these large craft sticks that I got from Walmart. They also have large craft sticks at Dollar Tree, or you can use the smaller ones. It just depends on whatever you want your tray to look like. I needed to cut it off so that it would be nice and straight, and you want to get your line as straight as possible, which is why I used the ruler initially, and next I just used my first stick to mark off the line for all the rest of the sticks. Also, because my sticks would not reach the outside of my tray without ending, I went ahead and I cut them in half. This way I could use multiple pieces and it would just look like it was part of the pattern instead of me running out of the length of the stick. This pack came with about 45 craft sticks and I used a little over half. I used 24 craft sticks. I did have some extras left over from that, but you want to make sure that you do have extras in case some of them crack and you need to replace them. After I had them all cut with one end cut off and all of them cut in half, I used this Waverly wax to go ahead and stain my craft sticks. I just rubbed it on with a lint-free cloth and then I wiped off the excess. Make sure that you get the sides of your sticks. This is why I went ahead and stained them before putting it together. I wanted to make sure that all the sides were completely covered before I put them onto my tray. Once my stain dried, I was ready to go ahead and assemble my tray. I've lined my craft sticks up in this herringbone pattern and I did it right along this middle line that I drew, making sure that the bottom of my bottom stick and the top corner of my top stick were right along the line. This kind of made it more centered, and you guys, if it's not perfect, it is okay. This tray is so beautiful and you're not going to notice if it's slightly off. So I glued them onto my poster board, and you guys, when you're gluing this, make sure that the stick is pretty much where you want it to be when you put it on, because the glue does not slide very well on this poster board. It adheres pretty quickly. Also, I don't plan to put anything too heavy duty on this tray, but if you want, you can use a stronger adhesive like Gorilla Glue or E6000. The hot glue did the job for me. I'm just going to continue in my pattern, putting one stick on top and one right next to it, slightly lower, and this is going to create my herringbone pattern. Now, I used the sticks with the rounded ends when I knew that they would be hanging off the edge of my oval, and any time where that stick would not reach, I just put another one of my pieces without the oval on, and then I put the oval on the end. You'll see what I mean when you see the finished product before I cut all the ends off. Now, because I'm human and I couldn't get the sticks at exact 90-degree angles every time, if there was any place that looked like it might have a gap because I didn't cut my stick straight, I just went ahead and I put some of this brown chalk paint right onto my poster board. That way, if there was a tiny little gap, you wouldn't see the white peeking through. But honestly, you guys, when you look at this as a finished product, you don't really see those little mistakes anyway. Once I got to the bottom, I went ahead and did the same process going up from my starting point. And you guys, I kind of got this idea in my head and I was putting it together as I was filming it for you. I do think it might have been easier to just start at the top, but you can play around with that when you make yours. As you can see, I've got most of my craft sticks placed onto my poster board, and there are some where I needed 2 of those rectangular pieces before I put a rounded piece on the end, but it all comes out beautifully. Next, I needed to go ahead and trim up my sticks before cutting close to the oval. This just made it easier for my hand to fit. And you guys, when you do this part, make sure you use a very sharp pair of scissors. If your scissors are too dull, your craft sticks are just going to kind of shred up and roll up on you, and you don't want that. So make sure you use a sharp pair of scissors, and we are going to cut very, very close as you can to that poster board, because we want it to fit into our tray. Now, when I was cutting, one piece did pop off, but that's where I had those extra pieces that I told you about in the beginning. I was able to just glue another piece on and trim it up and cover up that space easily. Once I was ready to put it in my tray, I did have a few spots that were slightly too big to fit into the tray, but I was able to trim those up. Because these sticks can shred when you cut them, that's why we want to cut our oval of poster board as close as we can to the right size at the beginning, maybe even slightly smaller than you need it to be, just so that this step goes a lot more easily. Once I had it trimmed up and it fit perfectly, I just put some hot glue into the bottom of my tray, and I had to kind of readjust this way and that until I found the exact way my bottom was supposed to fit into my tray. I pressed it down and it looks so gorgeous, you guys. The camera does not do it justice. This pattern looks so pretty. Next, I wanted to just put a little detail around the handle, so I'm using this jute rope that I have. If you've been watching my channel for any length of time, you know this is my favorite rope. I use it all the time. I get it off of Amazon, and I will link it down in the description box for you if you want to get some. But you could also use the twine that they sell at Dollar Tree to do this step, and it would look really nice as well. That twine's just a little bit thinner, and I like the thicker rope that I get off of Amazon. So I'm just going to wrap it around, snip it off, and hot glue it on there, and then I did the same thing to the other handle. And that is it, you guys. It looks so simple, but I cannot tell you how beautiful this looks in person. If you're going to put any food or drinks on it, I would recommend going ahead and sealing that wood. But I am just in love with this, and I cannot believe I put this together for $8. Now, I think this last DIY is my favorite. I loved this lantern. I loved the beads that were on it, but the $40 price tag I did not love. So I used these little frames, and I've used these before, guys. I did a DIY recently where I did a planter out of these frames. I had to pop out that inner lining for that DIY, so I had some of these little pictures that I had popped out of the frames already on hand. So in order to make it a solid box, I went ahead and glued those pictures right in. If you don't have extra pictures, you could always grab a project board, cut a square, and build out your blocks that way. I ended up doing both of them, even though you don't see it here, and I also got some mason jar lids and glued them together so that they wouldn't come apart. If I was able to just run out to the store like I normally would, I would probably go and see if I could find maybe some circle blocks or anything like that, but these did the job in a pinch. So because these were black and brown and I wanted them to kind of match the light wood on the beads that I had, I went ahead and painted them white. And you'll see in a little bit, this made it very easy to give that wood look without having to do a lot of different layers of paint. So I used white chalk paint and covered both my boxes and my mason jar lids completely with white paint. Once they were covered, I was ready to start assembling the top and bottom of my lantern. So I needed to glue my mason jar lids right in the middle of my two boxes. Now if you used project board to build out your boxes, this next little detail won't matter, but if you did it exactly as I did and you used extra pictures, one side will be completely flat, so you'll put the mason jar on the completely flat side. The other side of one of your boxes will be raised a little, and you want to put the other mason jar lid on that raised side. This is because we want the sides that we're going to see the most often to be nice and smooth, and the mason jar lid on the bottom can be on the raised side because we won't see it. Next, we're ready to decide how tall we want our lantern to be. So what I did was I put the candle inside that I intended to use. I grabbed a bamboo skewer and I just gave it about an inch or two above the candle, and I cut my skewer to that length. I cut 8 skewers in all using that same length to make sure that all of my sides would be the same height. Now the inspiration piece did have 2 of the beaded columns and 1 solid wood column per side on it, and if you wanted to do it that way, you could grab one of the toilet bowl plungers that they have at Dollar Tree, cut it down to size, and use that for your solid column. However, I am all about the beads, so I went all in on the beads and I wanted all 8 of my columns to be using the beads. So after I had all of my skewers cut to size, I grabbed some beads, and these are just some that I got off of Amazon. They do have some at Dollar Tree, but I use these so often that I like to buy them in bulk because it is much more affordable. And I just threaded the beads right onto my skewers. Mine ended up being about 15 beads long, but depending on the size of your beads and how tall you decided you wanted your lantern to be, that might change. You just want to make sure that the bottom bead is completely covering the bottom of the skewer and your top bead is completely covering the top. This will make it much easier to glue together when we get to that step because the tops of the beads are much more flat and easy to glue than the pointy part of the skewer. Once I had all of my beads on my skewers, I was ready to paint them. I used this Waverly chalk paint, and I did the same process where I diluted this into water, about 50% paint and 50% water. This created a stain which looked beautiful on my beads. So I just painted that right onto my beads and then wiped it off with a paper towel, and it gave a stained wood effect where I could still see the wood grain in the beads without having to have an extra bottle of stain around. I used that same watered down paint and I painted on my box, making sure to go in the same direction up and down and in the same direction when I did the sides of my box. Now, because I watered this paint down, when it dried, it kind of looked like wood grain. Because it was white, you could see the white coming through, so I didn't even need to come back through and do the dry brushing technique to give it that little bit of extra texture. It just looked like wood on its own when it dried. The diluted paint did not stick as well to the metal on the mason jar lid, so I just went back and used the plain old chalk paint without watering it down on that part, and that covered it very well in about 1 to 2 coats of paint. So once all that dried, I was ready to assemble my lantern. I took my box that had the flat side without the mason jar lid, and I made that the bottom of my lantern so that that raised side is pointing down and no one will ever see it. And all I did was put a little dab of hot glue on the bottom of my column of beads, and I held it there until it was steady, and then I did the same thing in all 4 corners of my box. Now I'm going to come back through with my remaining 4 columns of beads, and I'm just going to put them right in the middle of the ones that I have in the corners. I just eyeballed it to see where the middle point was. After I got that done, my lantern was almost complete. I put my candle right in the middle, and this is just an LED candle that I got from Walmart. Please guys, don't use this for real candles. This is just for decoration only. Before I put the top on, I wanted to add that little detail that they had on there, which was a rope handle. So I just took a little extra piece of the twine that I had from my carpet that I just made, and I tied a little knot on it and glued it right onto my mason jar lid. This was a really cute detail to put on the top, and I love that little pop of natural fiber that it added to the top. Once I had that done, I just laid my top of my lantern right on top. I want to be able to pull that candle out. I plan to decorate this for holidays and things like that. You could hot glue it on there and it would stay on there for good, and I just think this is simply lovely. So while I was at Target, I took some video because I wanted to remember what I saw, and what I saw I did not like. This was $29.99 and I was not willing to pay for that. So what I did was I grabbed this vase from the Dollar Tree, and this is just a spool of twine that I got off of Amazon. Now honestly guys, this is a lot cheaper to buy it in bulk like this than it is to get it the nautical rope at Dollar Tree. So I'm going to drop a link in the description box so that you can get this same twine if you would like to get it and do some projects. Now I'm just going to wrap it around the vase, and make sure you get a clear vase. I did try this with a red one that was more the shape of the inspiration piece, but you could kind of see the red peeking through. And as you go around and do the bottom row, I kind of set it on the table to make sure that it would set evenly, and then I just continued wrapping it around and around until I got to the top of the vase. Now this is a really easy project to do. Even a beginner crafter can do it, but it comes out looking so high-end. Once I got to the top, I made sure to put my twine a little bit higher than the top. I cut off my rope, and then I just added a little dab of hot glue right there at the top. Now sometimes you'll get where your twine or your rope is fraying a little bit, so you can just put another extra little dab of hot glue and very carefully, after it's cooled off for a moment, just squeeze it together, and that'll make it look nice and finished. Now, once I did that, I grabbed a lighter and I very quickly and very carefully, you guys, I just ran right over this. And what that did is it burned all the little extra pieces off to make it look a little neater. Next, I took some painter's tape, and this was easy to do because you can see the line where each row of your rope is going, so you can just follow that right along. You'll need to break your tape off into smaller pieces just because of the shape of the vase. One piece of tape does not go on nice and flat, and you want it to be flat because you don't want any paint to get under your tape. Now, this is some paint that I got from Walmart. It was 50 cents, and I love this beautiful coral color, and I very lightly brushed it on to my twine. Now you want to make sure you don't have too much paint on your brush, or else you'll get globs of paint and it's hard to spread out on the twine. Once that was dry, I just removed the tape and I had my piece. Now, instead of using the lighter again, I just used some scissors because I wasn't sure about putting heat on the paint, but I just absolutely love the way this came out. I think it looks gorgeous and just adds a pop of color that would make anyone smile. Next, I wanted to use some of these pretty picture frames that I had at my house to make some signs. So I'm going to use the frames along with some of the candle holders that you see at Dollar Tree. So I popped the glass out of the frames and I'm just going to paint them white. The square one was already painted white from another project that I had already completed, but I still went over it with the chalk paint to make sure that they matched. Next, I'm going to use a dry brush technique to come back along and give it a little bit of an aged and weathered look. All dry brush means is I'm going to get just a tiny bit of paint on my brush, and then I'm going to wipe most of it off onto a paper towel. Then I'm going to come back through with my almost completely dried brush and just lightly paint along some of the edges of the frame. This is going to make it look like it's a little older than it is, a little weathered, and perfect for that farmhouse look. I'm going to do the same thing with my candlesticks, which I also painted white. Now, once all of these are finished, I printed out these cute little sayings to go along with the lemon theme. One says fresh squeezed lemonade, 25 cents, and the other one says easy peasy lemon squeezy, which my kids definitely got a kick out of. I'm going to take the glass out of the frames and just trace around it on the paper to make sure that it fits exactly into the frame. And guys, I decided to use this craft paper. I liked the natural look of it. You can really use any paper you want and any saying you want. I'll go ahead and link these printables in the description box since I already made them, but you can really put whatever you want in these frames and it would be beautiful. Next, I'm going to pop everything back into the frame and make sure to secure it nice and tight. Once that's done, I'm ready to assemble them onto my candlesticks. So all I did was use a little bit of hot glue and glued it right onto the candlestick. Now, make sure when you're doing this that you look at it from a few different angles, from the top and from the side, to make sure that they're standing up nice and straight. Once those are finished, they look beautiful as they are, but I'm going to add a few flowers to cover up that hole right there and also to give it a little more visual interest. So I pulled out some flowers and I decided to use white and yellow to go along with the lemon theme. And I'm just going to use some hot glue and just glue them all along the edge of the picture frame. I love how this looks. With the ornate look of the picture frame, I feel like the flowers give it a little bit more of a romantic look and just really complete and round out the style of these picture frames. I'm going to go through with my biggest flowers and then come back through with some smaller ones. And once they're done, I have these beautiful picture frames that I can change out the picture, the saying, anything I want. I just love the way these came out. So for my first DIY, I wanted to use this planter that I had left over, but I wanted to age it up a little bit. So I found this technique that I wanted to try using vinegar in order to just distress it, age it up, and give it a little bit of rust. So I got a bucket and I covered it completely with a towel, and I soaked the towel in some vinegar. Now, I just had to use the vinegar that I had on hand. If I had a little bit more, I think I would have soaked it more. However, this was an experiment. I just wanted to see how it worked out. So I covered it completely with the cloth and soaked it once more in vinegar. And I did turn it over and add a little more vinegar once while it was soaking. Now, I like things a little bit distressed, but I don't like too much rust, or my personal preference is just a little bit distressed. So I left mine for about 5 hours, and you can leave yours for 24 hours and get even more of an effect than I did, but this worked out perfectly. You can see there's a little bit of rust, there's a little bit of aging all around the planter, and I love this level of distressing. Next, I grabbed some Jenga blocks. Now, I use these brown ones. Of course, you can use the natural ones and paint them whatever color you'd like to paint them. So I started out with 2 piles of 13, and I glued together 7, and I made sure to use a ruler to make it nice and even because I'm going to use this as a shelf and I want it to look nice as I go. Another thing you want to look out for with these Jenga blocks is sometimes they're not all the same size, so make sure you get 13 for each shelf that are relatively the same size. Now, in order to get enough of the brown ones, I did have to open 2 packages. If you're using the natural wood ones, you can get 1 pack that's all the natural wood, and that should be enough. Now I made 1 row of 7 and 1 row of 6, and then I glued them right on top of one another. I made sure to center the 6 right in the middle of the 7 so that it was nice and even. And I did the same thing for my other pile of 13. Next, I wanted to make some handles for my bucket, and this is just a wreath form that I have that I took apart, and I just kind of break pieces of metal off of it as I need to. Once I have it broken off, I'm just going to flatten it out, and then I'm going to take a Jenga block and place it right in the middle. So I wanted the overhang on each side to be about even, and then I bent it so that it was about the width of the Jenga block. I bent up the tips just a little bit to make it easier for me to glue it on, and then I needed to make sure that I could glue it onto my planter. So I just put a little bend in it so that it would fit around that curved shape a little more easily. Next, I just used a dab of hot glue to attach to my tumbling tower block. Now guys, just remember for all of my DIYs, I do use hot glue just to make it easier for me to put things together, but you might want to use a more heavy duty glue like Gorilla Glue or E6000 to make sure your projects stay together nicely. So now that all that was completed, I'm ready to take my shelves and just glue them right into my planter. Make sure that when you do this, you get it nice and even. If you have a tiny little level, that would be nice to use, because if you're using this as a shelf, you don't want your things to be sideways or slide this way or that. I put the second shelf in, and then I just used a little bit of glue to attach my handles. And that was all there was to this DIY. I love the aged look of it. I just love how it came out. Now this is really small. You're not going to fit a lot of bathroom decor on it, but just as a little piece of visual interest to put in your bathroom right next to your sink, I think it's gorgeous. It's time to craft. I'm going to start out with these little ceramic bunnies that I got from Dollar Tree and a glass plate. Now I'm going to take the bunnies out of their containers and just snip off this little metal loop that's holding on this ribbon to hang it with. These were a little more difficult to get out than I thought they would be, but I was able to use my wire cutters and cut them down low enough to be able to use them. Once I've gotten those all out, I'm going to arrange my bunnies in a little pattern following each other, and then I'm going to set my plate right on top. This will let me know exactly where I want to put my bunnies. Now, I didn't do this on purpose, but using this glass plate allowed me to see exactly where the bunnies were, and I'm going to spray paint the whole thing anyway. So if you find a glass plate, that'll make this project just a tad bit easier. Now I'm using Gorilla Hot Glue right here to glue the plate onto my ceramic bunnies. However, when you make this at home, I would recommend using some E6000. I was using the hot glue just to get it done quickly for the purposes of this video, and some of them stuck very well and some of them fell right off. So make sure that you use a really good adhesive for this, so this will last you for seasons to come. Next, I'm going to use some spray paint to spray paint this a nice blush pink. Now, I spray painted this out in my garage in the middle of winter, and it accidentally froze the paint, but it left this beautiful speckled pattern that almost looks like a nice stone. So that was a happy mistake. And I love the way it came out. I'm going to use my little cake plate to put some jelly beans on that we can just kind of eat off of all the way through the Easter season. Or you can use it for decoration. These little bunnies are so fun, and this was so easy to put together. Now the last DIY is this monogrammed plaque. I thought it was adorable. I loved the colors in it, but the $17 price tag was not in my budget. So I'm going to make one using one of these plaques that I got from Dollar Tree. I'm going to start by taking off the price tag, and if you ever have a hard time getting those off, just use a hair dryer to apply a little bit of heat, and the adhesive comes off very nicely and leaves you a nice clean finish. Next, I'm going to come through with some white chalk paint, and I'm going to paint the entire plaque white. But first I'm going to take off the string that was holding it on, and I'm going to put something else on there later. Once that's finished, I'm ready to put my monogram on there, or if you choose like I did, I decided to put hello instead of putting our monogram on this plaque. So I just printed out some words that I liked the look of the font, and I'm going to cut them out, color the back with a pencil, and once that's completely colored, I'm going to tape it right into the middle of my plaque. Now, if you have a vinyl cutting machine, then of course you can do this with a vinyl cutter instead. I don't have one, so I'm going to do it the old school way. Once it's taped right in the middle, I can use a pen or a pencil or anything that will press that pencil on the back into my board. So I'm just going to trace along all the letters, and that's going to leave an outline for me wherever I used my pen. Once I take my paper off, I have this nice stencil that I can use to color in for my lettering. Now, I like to use these Sharpie paint pens, but one of my friends did let me know that they have some at Dollar General that are really good. So I'm going to try those next time because I love a good deal and I like to get one where I can. Once I have all my lettering colored in, I'm ready to start doing the flowers around my word. Now I'm using these napkins that I got from Dollar Tree, but there's so many different ways you can take this. Now all of these are napkins that I have. A lot of them I got from Party City, but all of these would be really fun and easy way to jazz up a plaque. These were from the Dollar Tree spring collection, but I still see them every time I go. So if you like these flowers and birds, you can use them. Now I'm going to go ahead and cut out what I want. And this, what you see me doing here is I was just trying to see like what could fit where could I fit an entire bird. Once I had that figured out, I separated the two pieces, the two plies of the napkin, and just used the top layer. And I'm going to use some Mod Podge and glue that on to my board. Now I want to use a paintbrush, and I'm going to start at the inside and I'm going to paint outward with my Mod Podge. And here's a trick for getting it not to wrinkle. I'm going to use this piece of saran wrap, and after I have my Mod Podge on, I'm going to go ahead and smooth it out with the saran wrap. And you guys, I swear, once I found this trick, I was able to do these Mod Podge creations with napkins with barely any wrinkles, and it looks great. Once I'm done, I'm going to go ahead and use the Mod Podge over the entire board just to seal everything together. And I'm going to clean up my edges by using scissors or just pulling off any of the extra pieces. Once that's nice and dry, I'm ready to figure out how I'm going to hang this. Now the inspiration piece just had some ribbon, but I love twine and beads, so I'm going to use twine and beads to hang my plaque. So I just snipped off a piece of twine and I'm just going to tie it in a nice knot, and I just want to make sure that I tie the knot big enough that it does not come out. So I'm going to actually tie it a few times to make sure that it does not go through the hole. Once I have that completed, I'm going to go ahead and put a little bit of tape at the end of my twine. And then I'm going to take these beads that I have. I just had these on hand. They do have beads at Dollar Tree, not these exact beads, but you can find some. Or you can get some at Michael's. They always have great deals on beads, especially if you use the coupons they have. I love to wait until I have a coupon and then buy some beads. And I also have a link down in the description box to some that I get on Amazon whenever I'm buying them in bulk. But I'm just going to take my beads and I'm going to string them onto my twine. And once I have it completely full, I'm just going to put the other end right through the other hole in my plaque and tie a nice big secure knot. And that's it. I love how this came out. I love the flowers in this one, but I also love how for a very affordable price, just a pack of napkins that you like the design on, you can make some beautiful wall decor for your house. So this DIY was inspired by this piece that I saw on Etsy. I loved everything about it. I think it's adorable. I love the rope, but I wanted to incorporate it into a pizza pan craft that I had been intending to make for a while. So I got this little circular beach sign from the Dollar Tree, and I noticed that it fits perfectly right into the pizza pan. So I'm just going to put some hot glue all over it, flip it back over, and stick it to my pan. Next, I grabbed some nautical rope also that I got from Dollar Tree, and you guys, I use this stuff so much that I did have a lot of scraps that I used. I do think though altogether I probably used about 2 full packs of the nautical rope. You might want to grab 3 just in case. So I'm going to make 1 pass of the nautical rope right around the edge of the pizza pan, like you've probably seen done on a lot of those adorable pizza pans that we've seen around. Next, I'm going to do another ring around the inside of that first ring of nautical rope. And I really wanted to do this, one, because I wanted to build it up, but also I wanted to cover up that hole where the rope was to hang it originally. Next, I'm going to do a row of nautical rope in between the first 2 that I put on there. And then I'm going to do a rope just outside of the rope that is on there. So what I'm trying to do is build up kind of a circular shape to this nautical rope going around this pan. So that's why I did the one on top so that it would be a little bit rounded. And I'm going to do another row right after this to cover up that last edge. Now, if you are using scraps like me, be sure to start and stop your scraps at the same point or in the 4 corners of the pizza pan, because we're going to be covering that up, and so that's the best way to cover up your ends. Next, I'm going to take some twine, and I need to glue all these pieces of twine together. So in order to save my fingers from being burned by hot glue, I grabbed some parchment paper and I basically put the glue down right next to the piece of twine that I started with. So I started with one piece, I put the hot glue basically on the parchment paper right next to it, and then I slid my next piece of twine over that hot glue and onto my original piece of twine. Now, I was able to do this without getting any hot glue on my fingers, and none of the hot glue seeped through the top. And I did this for 10 rows of twine. Once it was done, I was able to peel it right off. They all stuck together and they were like a strip of twine with hot glue on the back. Next, I cut off the edge just to even it out, and then I needed to measure to see how far around I needed my piece of twine to go to cover up my rope that I put around my pizza pan. So it turns out that I needed about 3 inches. So altogether, I needed about 12 inches of this strip of twine, but I would recommend you doing 13 to 14 just to give yourself a little extra margin in case you make a mistake. Next, I'm going to put some hot glue right at the top of my pizza pan and slide my rope of twine right into it. I let that dry and then I wrapped it around my rope and hot glued it to the back. This way it looked like it was wrapped all around my rope that I put around the edge of my pizza pan, and it gave it that nautical look. I did the same thing in the other 3 corners of my pizza pan. Once I had all 4 secured to the back, that was it. I absolutely love how this came out. I would never have been able to make a graphic like this on my own, and I was so happy when it fit right into that pizza pan, and giving it that little bit of nautical flair with the rope around the outside really added to that coastal farmhouse look. I think it's adorable. So for my last DIY, I wanted to recreate this flower wall decor, but not for $50. I cannot believe that's how much it cost. So I got this picture from Dollar Tree. I actually think I picked this one up around Valentine's Day, but they have the same frame with different pictures in it all throughout the year. I'm going to pop out the picture and I'm going to use this to cut off the edges to make that little wood detailing in the corner of the pictures. So in order to do that evenly, I'm going to go ahead and make an X right across the back of my picture frame. This is going to let me know where the middle of each corner is. After I've done that, I'm going to make a 2-inch line across the bottom, and I'm going to make sure that my 1-inch mark lines up exactly with my lines that I drew, my X. This is just going to ensure that all 4 of my triangles are the same shape and size. Once I've got them all marked off, I'll just cut them off with some scissors. And now it's time to paint the frame. So I'm just going to use that same truffle brown paint to paint my picture frame. Now you want to make sure that you get all sides of this and the inside, because you're going to be able to see all of that once our final project is completed. We're also going to paint our little triangles, making sure that the long side of the triangle is also painted brown. Next, I went to my kitchen and I grabbed a pack of bamboo skewers. Now I'm going to paint these black, and you definitely want to use the bamboo skewers instead of the wooden craft dowels, because these bamboo ones, they bend a little bit more easily, which we're going to need a little bit later in our project. Now, in order to do the wood grain detailing, I just used that same black that I had out, and I also added some of this mineral chalk paint for a little contrast. I added the black into it just to darken it up a little bit, and I did the same dry brushing technique that we used on the previous project just to give that wood grained effect. And don't forget to put that same detail on your triangles. So after we're done with that, we're ready for the flower. I got this from Dollar Tree. It was in the garden section, and it was only $1 for this beautiful flower. I can't believe it. So what I'm going to do is, after taking off the parts that were hanging, I'm going to just fill in the hole with a little bit of hot glue, so that way when I paint it, you won't be able to see the hole. I'm going to come back through with my plaster chalk paint, and I'm going to paint this flower. Now, if you want a pop of color, you could totally leave it the color that it is. I was going for the vibe of the inspiration piece, so I went ahead and painted this, and I think I like it both ways, so it just depends on your mood. All it needed was 2 to 3 coats of this chalk paint and then it was ready to distress. So in order to do that, I just took the plaster that I had left over, added a little bit of black to it, and that gave me a nice gray color. This was perfect for me to go around the edges of my flower and give it that distressed look. Make sure that you're using the dry brush technique so that you're not getting too much of a heavy hand on this, but don't worry, if you make a spot that's a little too dark, you can always go back over it with the plaster color again just to soften up that color. Those of us who make YouTube videos have the power of editing, so we can edit out some of those mistakes that we make, but everyone makes them, so don't worry. When it comes to paint, you can always just paint over it if you do too much. And now it's time to put everything together. So we're going to turn our frame upside down on the table, and I'm just going to glue my triangles right into this little ledge that's already in the frame. If you want your triangles to be flush with the front of the frame, you could do that too. That would be a cute look. I just went the easy route and put this right back in the indentation that was already there from the picture that came with the frame. Next, I'm going to grab my bamboo skewers and I'm just going to mark off exactly where I need to cut them. And then I'm going to cut both of them down to size. Once I have that done, I'm ready to just make a crisscross shape right across the back of my picture frame. Now, this is why the bamboo skewers are a little bit better than the wooden crafting dowels, because the bamboo has a little bit of give to it. That second skewer that you put on, you're going to have to hold it on there and give it a little bit of bend until your hot glue dries, because it's going over that front one. So it's just a little bit easier to do it this way with the bamboo. Now, once I had that on there, I realized that my flower doesn't exactly touch the bamboo where I need to glue it on. So in order to get around that, I just grabbed 2 little wooden beads, and you can use whatever you have on hand that's the right size. I bet you could even just use some paper that you roll up tightly to make a little bead shape. And I just glued them right onto my dowels on the bottom one, so the one that's a little bit further away from my flower. And this was perfect. Now it made contact with the inside of that flower, and I was able to just put some hot glue right on the sides where I needed it, and then on the middle on my little beads, and it held very securely this way. So you guys, I'm kind of obsessed with how easy this was to put together and how beautifully it came out. I think I might grab some different flowers, paint them different colors, and do 4 or 5 more of these. For this DIY, I'm going to start with some vases that I got from Dollar Tree. I love the shape of these and I thought they would be perfect for this project. I'm going to use chalk paint and just paint a layer or 2 of paint over all of them, making sure to get all my brush strokes in the same direction because I want that to look nice and smooth when I'm done. Now, I didn't worry too much about the coverage on the bottom because I'm going to be covering that up in the next step. Now I'm going to use a technique that I saw on TikTok to make a really cool textured effect in your paint. So I'm going to use some chalk paint, and I went for this light brown color, and then I'm going to add some baking soda to that and combine it completely until it's kind of smooth but a very thick version of chalk paint. Now you can add as much baking soda as you would like to your mixture. That's just going to change the texture and what it looks like when you put it on your vase. So I wanted mine to be pretty thick because I wanted to get the most drastic contrast that I could between that smooth plaster colored chalk paint that I put on there and this textured color. Next, I'm going to use some painter's tape and just tape off where I want the line to be between my 2 colors and textures of chalk paint. Now, this vase is kind of curved, so you really have to work with it to get that line to be straight. The top of your tape is going to be a little wrinkly, but that's okay. You want the bottom of your tape to be nice and smooth because that's going to create a nice clean line when we're done with our project. And I'm going to do the same thing with the other vase, but I thought this one would look pretty cool with an asymmetric look. So I did a high-low effect with my painter's tape in order to add my texture onto the vase. Once everything is taped off, I'm ready to play and experiment with this mixture of paint. Now, I decided to do more of a stippling effect on the bottom because I wanted it to kind of look like plaster or mud, or like it had been shaped just by clay or earth. I really liked the idea of that smooth and chunky, but when I put it on there, it was kind of flattening out a little bit on me, so I added some more baking soda and that fixed it right up. It was nice and thick, and all those little peaks and valleys from the stippling really showed up. So just play around with it, guys. See what it looks like as you go. Add some paint, just see how you like it. So once I got everything covered, came the most satisfying part of any DIY, which is taking that painter's tape off and revealing that nice clean line. You guys, I love the contrast between that smooth, light chalk paint and that textured effect on the bottom. I think these came out so beautifully. They look so high end, and you would never guess how quick and easy they were to put together. And the last DIY is a little welcome sign that would be perfect in a little vignette, even on a tiered tray. You can put it on your entrance, wherever you'd like. I'm going to start out by using this mirrored frame that I got from Dollar Tree. I love these little frames. They're really scrolly and pretty, and they have them from time to time. So just check your Dollar Tree and see when they get them in. I didn't want it to be completely black, so I wanted to do a little dry brushing in white. All dry brushing means is that I got just a tiny little bit of paint on my paintbrush and I wiped most of it off, and then I went over the entire frame and kind of whitewashed it with the chalk paint. Next, I used this welcome sign, and this is just one of the little metal words that come in a pack of 3. They have them for all occasions. This one, I think, had a welcome, a blessed, and a thankful. And I'm just using some brown chalk paint, once again dry brushing it to get a little bit of that shine off and to make it look a little weathered and aged. Once that's done, I decided I wanted to add a little bit of ribbon to it, and I think this would look really cute with some burlap ribbon, but I actually didn't have any, and I've been eyeballing this ribbon to use for a while. It's a bit rustic, but it's got that gold in it, so it's kind of like a rustic glam type of a look. I really love it. I decided to wrap it around my picture frame, and here you'll see me wrap it around, do a little bit of a loop, and then go around the back. But I did go back afterwards and kind of cinch in that back half too, because I thought that gave it a really nice look. Now I'm making this just kind of as an all occasions type of a thing, but I think this would be beautiful at Christmas time with Christmas greenery. So I just grabbed some everyday greenery that I had, and I put it in with some hot glue at a diagonal angle on 2 sides of my ribbon. And then once that was done, I added a little bit of twine to cinch it in the middle, make sure everything stayed secure, and just to give it another little touch of rustic farmhouse charm. After that was done, all I needed to do was add my welcome sign to my frame. Now, I had a thought that this would be adorable if I cut out little names of people and made place settings for Thanksgiving using this and some Thanksgiving fall greenery. I think it would look beautiful, and I think this idea can go in so many different directions. I love the look of this Kirkland's wall plaque made to look like an enamel serving tray, and I wanted to try to make it, but for less than the price that they were asking, which is just frankly not in my budget at this time. But this $3 plastic tray from Walmart is perfect to do this Kirkland's inspired DIY. I'm going to start out with this Waverly chalk paint in the color white, and I'm just going to paint it front, back, and on the sides. Another way you could go with this would be to spray paint it with a gloss white spray paint. That would really go a long way to give you that glossiness of the enamel look. While that was drying, I did a quick Google search for the phrase, "Bless the food before us." So many options popped up. You will have your pick of any type of font you would like. Then I just printed it out, and I'm going to do a pencil transfer to get this onto my tray. So I'm going to color the back with a pencil, making sure to cover every space where there is some writing on the front of my page. Once that's done, I'm going to flip it over and tape it onto my tray. And then I'm going to come along with a pen and I'm just going to trace right on top of this font. Now everywhere that I press with the pen will push some of that graphite onto my white tray, and I'll be able to use it as a sort of a stencil once I remove the paper. Now I can easily use a Sharpie paint pen to trace along my stencil and put this beautiful lettering onto my tray. I could never have done this with my regular handwriting, so I'm thankful for this nice budget-friendly way to get this look for less. Now to get that black detailing with the chipped look around the edge, I tried using the paint pen, which did not work. I also tried using a regular paintbrush, which didn't give me quite the look I was going for. In the end, I just used a small sponge brush, and this was perfect to go along the edge with some black chalk paint and just give it that little bit of detail. Now, every now and then, I did roll a little bit of the paint on the inside just to get a chippy look like this has been aged and weathered. And I love the way this came out. Now this was a quick, easy DIY, but this makes a big impact in the space that you use to decorate with it. And I just couldn't be happier with how this came out. And don't worry, if you're like me and you make some mistakes trying to get that look for less that you were going for, just keep crafting. You can always just cover it up with white paint and try again. For today's DIY, I wanted to try to recreate something similar to this pumpkin that I saw in the Kirkland's catalog. As you guys know, I love wood beads, I love twine, but I did not love this price tag for almost $37. With a few tweaks to make it fit my decor and preferences, I was able to recreate it at a really reasonable price. What we're going to need for this DIY is this wooden pumpkin sign, these metal letters, both from Dollar Tree, some wood beads, I already had some on hand. Then we're going to need some white or off-white paint. We're going to need some brown paint, and I actually ended up using the Waverly Antiquing Wax instead of this brown paint here, and a little bit of orange paint. Of course, you'll also need hot glue, scissors, and I did use a little bit of ribbon, but that is totally optional. We're going to start by taking the hanger off of this pumpkin, and we're also going to remove the bow and this little metal leaf. Now you're going to want to hang on to that because we will be putting it back on our pumpkin at the end of the DIY. Next, I'm going to just turn the pumpkin over instead of having to sand off all that glitter on the front side, and I'm going to use this chalk paint. I use the color plaster because it's just what I had on hand, but a white paint would do as well, and I'm just going to cover the entire pumpkin in this white paint. You want to make sure to also get the edges of the pumpkin because you'll be able to see that when we hang it on the wall. Now we're going to just take that and set it to the side to dry. While it's drying, I'm going to get this container of metal words. Now this said welcome, harvest, and thankful. And the original inspiration for this actually said welcome, but I already have a welcome sign, so I decided to take the word thankful out and use that one. I'm going to paint the entire thing orange, and with this acrylic paint on the metal, it did take me 3 or 4 good coats before it was completely covered, and I liked the color that it was. Now, once the pumpkin is dry, I decided to use this darker color Waverly wax in the color Antique, and that's simply because it matched my decor a little bit better. You can use a lighter brown if you want to, and that would be a little more similar to the wood in the inspiration piece. So in order to make this faux wood finish, we're going to make vertical strokes up and down the pumpkin, and wherever we change directions, you're going to get a little knot in the wood. So we're going to use that to our advantage to make it look like faux wood with little knots all throughout. Make sure once again that you paint the sides and that you get it the color that you want it to be. Next, we're going to use the little indentations on the pumpkin to just draw out some lines. Now, the inspiration piece basically had the beads kind of on the inside perimeter of the pumpkin, but I decided that I wanted my beads to be on the very outside. I just thought that would be a little nicer, and so that's what I decided to do. You can do it exactly like the inspiration piece if you want to. But I just drew out a few curved lines, and then I used that line to put my hot glue on, and I attached some beads. Make sure you draw lightly enough that you can change it if you need a mistake, but dark enough so that you can see it. And as you can see here, I did not get it exactly straight, but that's okay. I just covered it up with the sign and a little bit of hot glue, and it was good to go. Next, I'm going to follow along the outside perimeter of the pumpkin, and I'm just going to add some wood beads around there. Now, I got these wood beads in a multi-pack that I got off of Amazon when everything was shut down, and it had a few different sizes. I didn't think I had enough of one size to do the entire pumpkins, so I did some smaller beads on the inside lines and a slightly larger bead on the outside. However, if you're able to get to a Michael's, they do have large containers of beads, and they're about $9, but if you wait until you have a coupon, you can get it for about $4 or $5, which is an awesome deal for a good amount of wooden beads. So if you have the option, you can do that. They also have wood beads at Dollar Tree. They're not these exact ones. They have different shapes and sizes, but it could be really pretty. You know, you can use your imagination and make your pumpkin look really unique. So by now my thankful word was nice and dry, and I'm just going to put it right in the middle of the pumpkin. Now this metal is not all that sturdy, and I realized that it was sagging a bit in the middle, so I just took a bead and I put it right in the middle of the K from thankful, and that just gave it a little something to rest on so that it was nice and straight all the way across. And I did make sure to glue my word kind of near where that little mistake was that I made in my lines, where it wasn't quite as straight as I wanted it to be. It just distracts attention away from it, and I still think it looks beautiful. My mom came and looked at it and she didn't even notice, so I call that a success. Next, I just grabbed some ribbon that I had. I just had just enough of this buffalo check ribbon, which I think goes really nicely with the wood and the orange. And then I took a few pieces of twine because I just thought it would look really nice together and fit into my decor. Since I love wood beads and twine, there's just a lot of it all over my house. So I just took this and I wrapped it around the stem of the pumpkin. Another option would be to tie a little bow, and then you could just glue that right into the base of the stem. I think that would be a little more similar to the inspiration piece, but I thought it was cute tied around, so I just did that. And I'm just going to add my middle leaf right back onto my pumpkin. Now, if you wanted to buy an extra pumpkin, you could have 2 leaves like the inspiration piece, or they do have little porcelain pumpkins at Dollar Tree right now that have some cute little metal leaves on them if you wanted it to have 2 like the inspiration piece. I love how this came out. I love the natural wood, the natural fibers of the jute, and I love how much it matches this adorable little lantern that I made a while back. I do have instructions for that DIY, and I will make sure to leave it down in the description box below, but I have just been switching out the greenery for every season, and it just looks perfect with this little pumpkin. First, quick and easy rustic winter DIY, you'll need a mason jar, and this is just one I had lying around my house, so it says ball on the side, but you can get some at Dollar Tree that don't have any pattern on the side, or I've seen some really cute ones at Dollar General that have some snowflakes on them. Those would be really perfect for this wintry luminary that we're going to be making. I'm also going to grab some lace. You could also use some burlap ribbon if you want even more of a rustic feel. So we're just going to measure off the lace, make sure it fits around that lip of the mason jar, and then I'm just going to add a dab of hot glue, and this is really just to hold it in place while I tie some twine around the top of my lace. Now, I only went around one time with the twine, which I know if you've been watching my channel, you're probably shocked because I'm kind of obsessed with twine. But I thought that going around one time added a nice little delicate touch, and then I tied a sweet little bow in front. Next, I just wanted to add a little more of that rustic touch to my luminary, so I'm going to use 2 of these mini pine cones. I got these in a bag at Dollar General, and I absolutely love them. They're so adorable for decorating, and they add that little bit of rustic touch to any project that you're doing. And I also just cut a few pieces off of a Christmas pick that I have been using all season just to cut little pieces off and use them in projects. I used a little bit of hot glue to attach those, and then I was ready to decorate the top of my jar with a little snowy touch to give it even more of that rustic feel. So to do that, I'm going to use some Epsom salt. Now, I got this from Walmart, and I got this giant bag. It was about $5, so I'll be doing a lot of winter crafting with it. I put some into a bowl deep enough for me to dip the top of my luminary into, and then I just used Mod Podge, covered the entire area that I wanted the Epsom salt to stick to, and then I dipped that right into the bowl. Now, if you have any parts that aren't getting covered, just add a little more Mod Podge, and you should be able to cover it very nicely. And I just love that kind of snowy feel that this gives to the jar. And as someone who grew up in Florida, I can appreciate adding that wintry rustic feeling of snow into my DIYs in case you don't have it right outside your front door. And that's it. I'm adding a faux candle to mine, and my rustic winter luminary is complete. I love how it turned out. Next up, I'm going to make a swag out of more treasures that my kids found in the yard. Now, I'm going to use these pine cones that they gathered, and I'm going to use this burlap ribbon that I had. Of course, you can use any type of ribbon or rope that you like to use in your DIYs. Now, I'm just going to kind of eyeball how long I want kind of the mid-level to be. So however long you cut your ribbon, you're going to probably want some a little longer and some a little shorter, just so that your pine cones will hang in a staggered way and you'll be able to see all of them. Once I have my pine cones laid out and I kind of have an idea of how I want them to hang once everything is together, I'm going to go ahead and just glue them onto the ribbon. Now, I found that it looked a little nicer and neater when I made a little triangle out of the bottom of my ribbon by using 2 little dabs of hot glue and then gluing that triangle right on top of my pine cone. And about halfway through my DIY, I had one of my little helpers demand her pine cones back. Thankfully, she shared them back with me so I could finish my swag. Now, to add a little pretty touch to this rustic winter DIY, I just tied off some ribbon that I had. Now, I was thinking about using twine for this, but then I decided that I wanted this to have a little more of a farmhousey or glam feel, so I used some pretty ribbon with some gold polka dots on it, and instead of tying a bow, I just tied off a little knot and glued those right on top of my pine cones. Once that was done, I was ready to lay them out one last time, make sure everything was hanging the way I wanted it to hang, and then I used that same polka dot ribbon to tie off the top of my swag. Once it was tied, I just cut the tops off at an angle, and that was it. I was ready to hang it. I love how this looks. It's rustic, but it still has kind of a farmhousey feel to it. It looks kind of thrown together with things that I have in my yard, but also you can tell that it was made with intention, and I just like the wintry feel that I get from this swag. Now, my first DIY is one that I decided to make because I am completely obsessed with the song Oh Holy Night. Always have been. It's always been my favorite Christmas song. So when I saw these candles at Dollar Tree, I knew I wanted to kind of make something that I could put that sentiment on for holiday decor around my house. So I bought 4 of these matching candles and I started by taping them off about 1/3 of the way up from the bottom with some painter's tape. Then I came along with this gold acrylic paint. I just got this from Walmart and it did take about 3 or 4 coats, but I was able to get a nice solid look out of this paint. Once I removed the painter's tape, I was able to get a nice high-end color blocked look out of the paint. Now, this is where I decided to personalize it a little bit with my Cricut Joy. I decided to use the permanent vinyl, and I will link that down in the description box as well if you want any. And I typed out the words, and I also did a quick search for the word nativity, and that is how I came up with this look that I put on my candles. I did do a tutorial on exactly how to use Design Space to get wording and things like that. So I will link that down in the description box if you want a more detailed tutorial on how to use it. But you will be shocked how easy it is to get the look that you want out of lettering, graphics, anything like that. So this was really just like a 5-minute little thing that it took me to find these graphics, and then I placed them right on my candles. And that was it. This was so easy, but you guys, the impact of this looks beautiful. This is just the perfect holiday decor. I love the way it looks lit. And I just love how this little touch of personalization really made these Dollar Tree candles look so high-end and gorgeous in my home. Okay, now I literally chose some of my favorite DIYs to put in this video, so there is no way that I can choose a favorite of my favorites. But you guys head down to the comments and let me know which one was your favorite. Now, if you're new to my channel, you may not know, but after all of my crafting, I like to add a DIY treat onto the end because, you know, it just makes life a little bit sweeter. So one of my favorite DIYs that I did this year was a super quick key lime pie, which was perfect to cool me down in those hot summer months. And I just love it. You can pop these things in the freezer and then like take them out one at a time to put in your lunchbox to take to work or anything like that. And they were just perfect. So I wanted to share them with you again. So it's time to eat. Now this is a recipe I found on Pinterest. It looked delicious, so I wanted to try it. Now I'm gonna start by crushing up some graham crackers, and y'all, this is totally me just being lazy. I should have put these graham crackers in the food processor, but I was trying not to have to wash dishes because, you know, mom life. I was trying to avoid another dish to wash, and these did crush up pretty easily, but you'll have an easier time if you just put them in the food processor. I'm going to add to that some butter, and I'm just going to mix it up, and then I'm going to set this aside and we will use those again later. Next, in a bowl, I'm going to combine some softened cream cheese, a can of sweetened condensed milk, and I'm going to go ahead and use a hand mixer to mix that until it's smooth. Once it's smooth, I'm going to add some of this key lime juice. If you have key limes at home, you can just squeeze those. I didn't have any on hand, so I just used the bottled stuff. And honestly, it still tasted delicious, even though I didn't use fresh limes. Once that's combined, I'm going to use some of this whipped topping that I have thawed out, and I'm going to fold it into my mixture. Now, if you just have this one container, I actually ended up using slightly less than the 8 ounces that the recipe called for because I wanted to have a few tablespoons left to put on the top of my treat to eat it when it was done. Next, I'm going to use these silicone baking cups that I have in order to be able to turn these out with a nice finished look. Now, if you don't have these silicone liners, you can just put these in a cup or something like that, and I'll show you that later, but you just won't be able to as easily turn these out onto a plate. And I love these silicone liners. I use them for my kids' lunch boxes and everything, so if you see any, you should go ahead and grab them anyway. I'm just going to go ahead and put my mixture into the silicone liners, and then I'm going to take some of that crumbled graham cracker and butter mixture and I'm going to put it right on top. Once that's done, I'm ready to put these into the freezer for about 3 to 4 hours, and you guys, they were so good. I left some in the refrigerator and they were good frozen, they were good just cold. It was just definitely a Pinterest win. Don't forget to check the description box for links to each and every one of these videos for even more Dollar Tree DIY farmhouse inspiration. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up, subscribe to my channel, and share it with your friends. And I'll see you next time when we repeat it all again.